My name is Colonel Danica Rowe, and according to my cousin Mark, I work in admin for the Army. He said it that afternoon with the same cheerful confidence someone might use to introduce a part-time receptionist. He didn't introduce me as a senior officer responsible for missions that require 3 levels of top-secret clearance. He didn't introduce me as the woman who moves 40,000 troops across continents. I was standing right beside him when he said it to a couple of his friends, both holding glasses of wine and nodding politely, as if they already understood exactly what box to put me in. I smiled. It was easier than correcting him, though I felt the familiar sting of being shrunk down to something small enough for people like Mark to understand. It was a family cookout, loud and warm and predictable. Mark liked being the unofficial host, even when it wasn't his house. He moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who had never once been misunderstood. When he waved me over to join the small circle of guests, I already knew what was coming. He loved introducing people like he was the curator of some exhibit, and I was his military office worker display. She handles paperwork and scheduling stuff, Mark added, pouring more wine for his friends. She keeps the files in order, very organized. I wondered for a moment what part of my job he imagined involved paperwork. Was it the briefings with the Joint Chiefs? The logistical networks that allowed thousands of soldiers to eat, move, and survive in hostile zones? Or maybe the casualty reports I had to sign off on when things went wrong? In Mark's world, all of that somehow counted as scheduling. I felt his friends look at me with that soft, polite smile people reserve for someone they assume is harmless. It wasn't cruel. It was just small. That was the part that always got me. I did not crave praise, but the gap between who I was and who they thought I was always felt strangely heavy. I had learned to let it sit there between us. A quiet weight I carried the way I carried everything else in my life, with a steady face and a calm breath. Mark moved on to talk about his new promotion to regional manager at his firm. He always did that. Introduce me like a footnote, then center himself with a dramatic pivot. I listened, nodding, while my mind drifted back to the secure call I had taken that morning. I had been discussing transportation routes for a multinational operation that would roll out in 48 hours. And now, here I was, being congratulated for keeping imaginary filing cabinets in order. Moments like that used to frustrate me deeply. But eventually, I learned that some people only know how to see the world through their own narrow lens. It was easier to let them believe whatever made sense to them. Besides, there is a strategic advantage to being underestimated. When people think you are nothing, they show you exactly who they are. That day was no different. I stayed quiet, steady, and composed. I had learned long ago that you do not need to shout to be powerful. You can stand in a backyard in jeans and a plain shirt while people laugh lightly at their own assumptions and still hold more responsibility than any of them could imagine. They did not know that. They never had. But the truth has a way of catching up to people, and I had a feeling it would catch up sooner than any of them expected. I joined the Army at 22. Not because I came from a military family or dreamed of medals, but because I wanted to do something that mattered. Basic training stripped me down to the core. Officer Candidate School rebuilt me. I wasn't the loudest leader. I wasn't the one beating my chest. I was the one who looked at the map, saw the choke points, and figured out how to win before the first shot was fired. I learned early on that logistics is the difference between an army and a mob. Amateurs talk about tactics. Professionals talk about logistics. If you can't move, you can't fight. If you can't eat, you die. By the time I made captain, I had led 3 overseas deployments. I coordinated a joint operation that supported both military units and civilian relief teams after a major earthquake in Southeast Asia. I wasn't just leading soldiers anymore. I was briefing allied commanders. I was calculating supply chains across time zones. I learned to see the battlefield from 10,000 feet up. As I moved up to major, then lieutenant colonel, the scope of my decisions widened. I wasn't in the trenches kicking down doors. I was the one deciding which doors got kicked and ensuring the boots doing the kicking had ammo in their magazines. Promotions came steadily. The responsibilities stacked even faster. I began mentoring junior officers, teaching them what no manual ever could: how to listen, how to lead without shouting, how to protect your people without losing the mission. When I pinned on the rank of Colonel 06, everything changed. An 06 is a senior field grade officer. In the hierarchy of the Army, a colonel is a titan. I commanded a brigade of 3,000 soldiers. I managed a budget of $400 million. I answered directly to the generals. And yet, back home, nothing had changed. At Thanksgiving, my aunt still asked if I ever thought about getting a normal job. My mom reminded me that I didn't have to stay in the Army forever, as if I were stuck, not choosing this life with both hands. And Mark? Mark once joked that I was probably really good at booking flights for the important guys. I laughed along. It was easier. Why didn't I correct them? Why didn't I wear my uniform to dinner? Because I saw how Mark treated the people he thought were important. The fawning, the requests for favors. If he knew I was a colonel, he wouldn't respect me. He would try to use me. He would ask for contracts for his buddies. He would ask for tours. So I let him think I was a clerk. It was my cover. No one saw the hours I spent in war rooms or the nights I slept in my office because there was no time for rest. They didn't see the weight of signing off on missions where people might not come back. But the disconnect stung. I was building something real, command by command, mission by mission. But to them, I was just Danica, the cousin who never married and worked a government desk job. Mark called me the day before the gala. His voice was upbeat in that way people use when they're about to give you instructions wrapped as invitations. "Danica," he chirped. "Listen, I managed to get tickets to the Defense Industry Charity Gala. It's at the Ritz. Big deal. Senators, defense contractors, maybe even some generals. It's huge for my networking." "That sounds nice, Mark," I said, looking at the stack of classified reports on my desk. "I have a spare ticket," he said. "I thought you should come. It might be good for you. You know, to get out, maybe meet someone. You can see how the other half lives." The arrogance was breathtaking. He was inviting me to an event in my industry as if he were giving me a tour of a foreign country. "And Danica," he added, his voice lowering slightly, "maybe don't wear the uniform. I know you guys have those dress uniforms, but let's keep it classy. Wear a nice dress. Something that says success, not government employee." I almost laughed. That morning, I had been in a secure room at the Pentagon, reviewing readiness reports with the Vice Chief of Staff. I was wearing my uniform because it commanded respect in rooms Mark couldn't even enter. But sure, let's wear something that says I have my life together. "I'll be there, Mark," I said, "and I'll wear a dress." "Great. I'll pick you up. Try to look sharp. I'm trying to impress some people." I hung up and stared at the phone. He didn't mean to insult me. That was the irony. He honestly thought he was helping. In his world, success was a title on a business card and a leased BMW. In my world, success was completing the mission and bringing everyone home. I chose a simple black floor-length gown, minimal jewelry, pearls, understated, civilian. It was enough to blend in, but not fade entirely. I'd worn the same earrings when I briefed the Secretary of Defense last year. Funny how context changes everything. In one room, they mark you as competent. In another, they just help you look like you tried. The ballroom was packed wall to wall with glitter and polished charm. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above the noise of laughter and bidding wars. The air buzzed with the scent of expensive cologne and catered confidence. I stood near the back, wine glass in hand, blending in like I'd trained to do my whole life. No uniform, no eagle insignia on my shoulders, just Danica in pearls. Mark found me about 20 minutes in. His face was flushed, full of the energy he got from being near money. "You made it," he said, placing a proprietorial hand on my arm. "You look great. Very professional." I smiled and nodded. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't want to know I'd just come from reviewing deployment readiness metrics for 20,000 personnel. "Stick with me," Mark said. "I see some heavy hitters. I want to make an introduction." He dragged me through the crowd. He introduced me to a few people, big donors, a CEO. "This is my cousin Danica," he said to a man in a tuxedo. "She works in admin for the Army. Keeps the wheels turning, right, Danica?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. I'd corrected him 100 times over the years. It had never made a difference. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Danica is looking for new opportunities," Mark added, winking at the CEO. "If you need someone to manage your calendar, she's a wizard with scheduling." The CEO smiled politely, bored. "Good to know." I sipped my wine. I felt the heat rising in my neck, not shame, anger. Mark was using me as a prop to show how benevolent he was. Look at me, helping my poor, aimless cousin. Then Mark froze. His eyes locked on a group of men standing near the VIP bar. "Oh my God," Mark whispered. "That's General Thomas Hughes." I looked. Indeed it was. General Hughes was a legend. 4 stars. Retired now, but he still held immense sway in the defense community. He had been my division commander when I was a major. We had worked through the night together during the crisis in the Balkans. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. "I have to meet him," Mark said, adjusting his tie. "If I can get a photo with Hughes, my firm will go crazy." He grabbed my arm. "Come on, don't say anything stupid." "Mark," I said, planting my feet, "maybe we should give him space." "Nonsense. These guys love meeting the public. Just smile and nod, Danica." He pulled me toward the VIP circle. General Hughes was surrounded by a few other officers and civilians. He looked bored, holding a glass of sparkling water. Mark barged into the circle. "General Hughes," Mark announced, extending his hand. "What an honor. I'm Mark Reynolds, VP at Stratus Global." General Hughes looked at Mark. He shook his hand politely, but his eyes were distant. "Good evening, Mr. Reynolds." "I just wanted to say, I've read all your books," Mark gushed. "Real leadership. That's what we need more of." Hughes nodded. "Thank you." Then Mark decided to pivot. He wanted to look like a man who supported the troops. He gestured to me. "And this is my cousin Danica," Mark said, putting an arm around my shoulder. "She's in the service, too. One of the little people, you know." Hughes's eyes shifted to me. Mark kept talking, oblivious. "She works in the back office. Admin stuff. Filing. Paperwork. I tell her, all the time, 'Danica, you gotta get a real career.' But she likes the stability. Government benefits, right, General?" Mark laughed. A loud, braying sound meant to invite the general into the joke. The joke was that I was small. The air in the circle changed instantly. General Hughes didn't laugh. He didn't smile. His eyes locked onto mine. He looked at my face. He looked at my posture. He saw past the black dress and the pearls. Recognition flashed in his eyes. He stepped forward, ignoring Mark completely. The general didn't offer me a handshake. He snapped his heels together. He straightened his back. And right there, in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by millionaires and politicians, General Thomas Hughes saluted me. It was a sharp, perfect salute. The kind reserved for peers, the kind reserved for respect. Mark's laugh died in his throat. He looked at the general, then at me, confused. "General?" Mark asked. Hughes held the salute until I returned it. I gave a subtle, respectful nod, the acknowledgement of a subordinate to a superior, even out of uniform. "At ease, General," I said softly. Hughes dropped his hand. A warm smile broke across his face. "Colonel Rowe," he said. His voice was deep and carried clearly over the chatter of the party. "I didn't know you were in D.C." Mark made a noise that sounded like a choking cat. "Colonel." Hughes ignored him. He took my hand in both of his. "I was just reading the report on the logistics overhaul you implemented for European Command," Hughes said. "Brilliant work, Danica. The way you rerouted the supply lines through Poland? You saved us weeks and millions of dollars." "It was a team effort, sir," I said. "Nonsense," Hughes said. "That was your strategy. I told the Chief of Staff just yesterday, if we had 10 more officers like Colonel Rowe, we wouldn't have any problems left to solve." The circle of VIPs was staring at me now. The boredom was gone. They were looking at me with awe. Mark was pale. He looked like he was vibrating. "Wait," Mark stammered. "General, you know her? She works in admin." General Hughes turned to Mark slowly. The warmth vanished from his eyes. He looked at Mark with the cold assessment of a man who had stared down dictators. "Admin?" Hughes repeated the word, dripping with disdain. He gestured to me. "This woman is a strategic operations commander," Hughes said, his voice hard. "She commands a brigade. She manages critical infrastructure for the entire theater of operations. When I was in command, I didn't make a move without consulting her first." Hughes stepped closer to Mark. "She doesn't keep the wheels turning, son. She builds the roads." Mark shrank back. He looked at me. He looked at the cousin he had mocked, the cousin he had tried to help get a real job. He saw me for the first time. He didn't see the receptionist. He saw the colonel. I didn't know," Mark whispered. "That," Hughes said, "is painfully obvious." Hughes turned his back on Mark. He offered me his arm. "Colonel, the secretary is over at the next table. He'd love to say hello. Walk with me?" I looked at Mark. He was standing alone, holding his wine glass, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I could have rubbed it in. I could have made a speech. But I didn't need to. The silence was loud enough. "I'd be honored, General," I said. I took Hughes's arm. We walked away, leaving Mark in the wake of his own ignorance. We spent the next hour with the Secretary of Defense. We talked about global strategy, about the challenges of the next fiscal year. I was in my element. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't hiding. When the night wound down, I walked out to the valet stand. Mark was there, waiting for his car. He saw me coming. He looked like he wanted to run away. He walked over to me. His shoulders were hunched. "Danica," he said. His voice was different, respectful, scared. "Mark," I said. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "All these years, you let me make those jokes. You let me look like an idiot." I looked at him calmly. "I didn't let you do anything, Mark. You chose to see what you wanted to see." "But you're a colonel," he said, shaking his head. That's a big deal." "It is. Why hide it?" "I wasn't hiding," I said. I just didn't feel the need to broadcast it to people who measure worth by the price of a suit. The valet pulled up in my car. It was a sensible sedan. Mark looked at it. Then he looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," I said. "But Mark, next time you want to introduce someone, ask them who they are first. Don't tell them." I got in the car. I drove away. As I crossed the bridge back into Arlington, my phone rang. It was Operations Command. "Colonel Rowe," I answered. "Ma'am, we have a situation developing in Sector 4. The general is asking for your assessment." "I'm 10 minutes out," I said. "Have the briefing ready." I hung up. I smiled. This was my world. Not the ballrooms, not the networking, but the work. Mark had his title. He had his leased car. I had the mission. And tonight, for the first time, I didn't mind the silence, because I knew exactly how loud my actions really were. I drove toward the base, back to where I belonged, on my terms.